Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Zach Gennard. I'm a writer at the Human Rights Foundation. We're one of the sponsors of this conference here, the Radical Innovation Summit. We help we help activists and nonprofits and individuals like yourselves use Bitcoin as a tool to achieve financial freedom, and perhaps even more importantly, to peacefully resist the financial repression that is all too common from dictatorships and authoritarian regimes. So today, I'm going to be hosting the panel on the freedom to transact, Bitcoin's promise and the push to control it. I'm joined by two of my very good friends, Renato Rodriguez of FETI, as well as Jorge Raisari of the Economic Inclusion Group. But who better to give an introduction than these fine, wonderful people? So maybe we can take, to start off, a few minutes, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about the work that you do.
Hey everyone, my name is Renata, as Zach said. So I work on FETI. FETI is a private wallet that has private chat and also mini apps inside. And the key thing about FETI, it's powered by community. So when you say community, it's like can be your family, can be your group, can be whoever you feel that's community. And the idea here is basically, right now you have two options, right? You have self-custody, so you own your money, or you keep your money under your mattress, or you put in a wallet, a cold wallet or a hot wallet, which is very expensive, can be very challenging technically. Or you can put your money in a third party, which can be a bank, can be an exchange that's very centralized. And we've been talking about centralization here for a while during this conference. So you don't have any control of your money. And you're having what we are proposing is the middle ground. So instead of you storing your funding, your funds, or this in a difficult way, or with other people, you store your funds with people that you trust, with your community. And we can talk more about it. So, and thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor to be sharing a space with such bright minds here. Thank you.
Thank you very much to everybody for coming to this event. I would like to congratulate the Salinas family, Atlas Network, Human Rights Foundation for putting this event together, because I really believe that technology allows us to be at the offensive when it comes to advancing freedom. Sometimes we're always resisting. We're always resisting against bad policies, against bad actions against us. And technology allows us to expand the opportunities we have to advance our freedom. Last year, I founded my organization, Economic Inclusion Group, and our main goal is to advance financial inclusion policies, because I really believe that if people don't have financial instruments, don't have access to these resources, how can they be prosperous? How can they be part of the economy? And if people are not part of the economy, this is when socialists win elections. This is when radicalism rises. There are two things that I have been working very, very focused. One is an issue that we call debanking, which is the people that lose their access to financial services for political reasons or for bad regulation. And we also really believe that Bitcoin is a source, is a tool for freedom. It's a tool for financial inclusion, not only Latin America, but all over the world. Currently, we're advising people in Congress in the US, people at the European Parliament and international institutions so that they understand the power of having a financial system that is freer and that everybody has access to it.
Thank you both so much for those great introductions. I was thinking that we could start this panel with a rather simple question, but I want to make sure that everybody listening is on the same page. And so that question is, what does it mean to have the freedom to transact? What does that actually look like in practice?
I can start in this case, freedom to transact is freedom of choice to use whatever you want, to send when you want, and to who you want. This sounds very basic, this sounds very practical, right? But it's very difficult to be done in this world. Even the person that has the biggest access to the banks, to all the system, technologies, everything, they cannot choose as well who, when, and how, right? You have this sentiment that, oh, now I can go right now in my Apple Pay and pay something. But you didn't choose that much. If you want to do this in a private way, tell me one form that you can do this. And then you have people that doesn't have any choices at all, either because they have to flee their countries and they don't have documentation, refugees, people seeking asylum, right? Or either people that doesn't have even systems, financial systems in their countries too. So it looks like something super granted, right, for us that we are privileged here. But even ourselves, we still don't have that much freedom as we think that we could have.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you, Renata. Freedom to transact, as you mentioned, is something that for many people, they take it for granted. Last week, as I was mentioning to you, I was in Zurich, in Switzerland. And I was talking about these concepts from people from Zurich. For them, since their entire life, they have been living in systems in which they have property rights, in which they have financial instruments, in which they have courts where they can resolve disputes. For them, they take it for granted. But for all of us in this room, that we know that billions of people, the majority of the world, are excluded from the ability and the freedom to transact, we don't take it for granted. Billions of people around the world cannot enter the market, cannot enjoy the market, cannot benefit from the market because they are blocked from doing so, for bad policies, because for regulations that block their abilities to prosper. And that's the problem in Latin America. All of us who are from this region, we know that only a minority of people have access to the market institutions that allow countries to prosper. So that's why we need to fight for this right, this freedom to transact.
Very well said, both of you. You said that the freedom to transact is often something we take for granted. It's such a foundational freedom. And I would argue that a lot of the other freedoms that we have or don't have in the world today actually are either underpinned or flow from that freedom to transact, like the freedom of speech, like freedom of assembly, and freedom of movement. So my question is, how is it exactly that the freedom to transact itself is underpinning these other freedoms? Why is it that it provides the foundation for these other freedoms to actually flourish?
I mean, money, if you have the money, you have the power, right? So what happens, it's basically money for the long time in the history is being used to manipulate people in different ways. So if you come from a very populist regime, it's the way that you silence people. If you come from dictatorship, it's the way that you silence people, right? So if you come from a populist, I give you, oh, you're gonna get benefits, grants, or something like that make your family better, right? So why I'm gonna vote in another person? Why am I gonna think about it, right? Or it can be something like you come from this country, dictatorship, so you're not allowed to transact. And every time that you transact, I'm gonna trace where you are. And then I'm gonna find where you are, who you are transact with, and we're gonna put you guys on the jail, very simple, right? So we think that we've been seeing people all the time talking about freedom of speech, freedom of moving around, but what the base, the core of this is the money. I was speaking another day with an activist from Nicaragua, and he was saying, no, Renata, I don't live in my country anymore. It's not that difficult to leave my country, right? And we have like a bank system that's integrated with other countries in Latin America. I can send money back home. And I would say, congratulations, you've been giving funds to the government in Nicaragua for a while, right? Even fighting against the government. Because who bites a little bit of this fund that you send through Western Union, through the bank system? It's the government. You are funding this, right? So if you don't understand how your financial system works, even if you don't wanna, if you are fighting against that, if you talk about it, but if you are feeding this, is it still there, right?
Yes, for those who believe in the ideas that we believe, economic freedom, freedom to transact, is almost like the basis, the fundamental freedoms. You need to own what you have earned of hard work during your entire life. In Venezuela, in my country, people lost in a year what they worked for decades. People lost their houses, their farms, their factories, without any kind of due process. If you don't have these basic freedoms, you don't have freedom of speech, you don't have political freedoms. Elections really don't matter if your property can be taken away like this. And this is why I congratulate many of the projects that came to the summit. In Brazil, this idea of providing zip codes to people, or other projects that are providing property rights in different places in Africa, or the projects that work on financial inclusion issues, because you need to empower people materially. I really believe that. It's not only about ideas, ideas are very important, but people have to have the means to be included in the economy. And from the political perspective, when you have people who are empowered economically, when they have a skin on the game on the system, when they see that their effort results in property, these people will believe in their democracy. They will believe in their institutions. They will not vote for radical ideas. So it is extremely important to protect that. Somebody told me today that the Banco Azteca here in Mexico is really working to bring bancarization to many people, bring financial instruments to many people in Mexico. That's really important. Why? Because when people have these tools, they can be more prosperous and we can have a better democracy.
Very well said, Jorge. In a lot of my work at the Human Rights Foundation revolves around the idea that Bitcoin is financial freedom. And this, come on, a little louder. As the world's first working, decentralized, digital form of money for neutrally exchanging value over the internet. It's a radical innovation, as this summit is named after. And so my question is, you look at something like Bitcoin, why is Bitcoin specifically poised to preserve and protect the freedom to transact, not just in places where we already have the freedom to transact, but also in places like authoritarian regimes and dictatorships where the freedom to transact either doesn't exist or is being actively restricted?
I think there is like a specificity on Bitcoin that make this very unique, right? One is the speed, two is the decentralization, right? And three is the capacity that you can fight to whatever is needed around you, right? What I want to say there. So, speed. I can give an example from activists again. So, some situations, activists they are exposed to act very fast, right? And what happened is basically, if they use any bank system, let's say in Argentina, I tried to pay someone in Argentina a while ago, and it took like 30 days, and the money didn't came through. So imagine you are mobilizing refugees, or you are trying to, I don't know, like save someone that is got like on the hands of, and you need to pay something on the hands of bad people, and they need to pay to release these guys, right? So there was this lady from South Sudan. She was telling me she would have 3 hours to pay to someone in South Sudan to release a person. Otherwise, they would have killed the person. And she would do this through Western Union, right? So she was in Switzerland. She started going to everywhere, trying to, and there is a limit of payment. There is a limit everything, right? And she started to see the time clocking, like ticking. The person is gonna die, And then suddenly, someone told to her like, "Oh, why you don't use Bitcoin?" And Bitcoin is a translator. I call this a translator of all the languages, all the currencies, basically, right? So she, in Switzerland, she could buy Bitcoin with the franc Swiss, with the Swiss franc, and then convert this into Bitcoin. And then she could contact someone in South Sudan that could convert in the local currency. So this flexibility of the Bitcoin, it's key for this type of activities, right? So in this case, she could save lives literally because of that. So I think the decentralization element as well, it's core on Bitcoin, because this makes, you give back to people the power to control this currency, right? Everyone here can contribute and validate every transaction of Bitcoin, right? And in the end of the day, to fight against the system in terms of like systems that are not working in favor of you, right? So the choice that you have to change, it's not now, it's now getting to your hands, not in the hands of other people, right? You individually, you can make differences around this with a small amount of Bitcoin or a big amount of Bitcoin.
Yes, many people join Bitcoin first from the theoretical perspective, or they come first because of the business opportunity. In my case, I joined, or I became part of the Bitcoin community because of necessity. I was sending remittances to people in Venezuela. I was sending humanitarian aid. I was also analyzing how much friction there is in the banking system, as you mentioned, when you do business in Latin America. So for me, Bitcoin was a solution, a rapid solution, a solution that allowed me to do things without needing the approval of any government or any institution. And then I met people like you, like Ovi, who then we start analyzing the characteristics, and they start explaining to me the characteristics of Bitcoin. Bitcoin, the centralization of Bitcoin, the way that there is not a single point of failure in the system, the way Bitcoin is decentralized and allows people to create the best protocols possible, it really makes a very strong system. It really allows people to flourish. And we live in an era in which the financial system is increasingly weaponized. It is increasingly difficult to proceed. A lot of people in Latin America, not only is that they don't have bank accounts, but if you want to do cross-border transactions, as you were mentioning, the money is frozen all the time. I know universities that their money is frozen all the time when it comes from Latin America to Europe, for example, or business people that when they send money to their suppliers, or foundations when they send money to their grantees, transactions are blocked all the time. With Bitcoin, we have the opportunity to actually give people financial inclusion and financial freedom to a way bigger extent than any other technology. And to me, the most important aspect is the decentralization aspect. Because if you have a company, for example, a company with a specific cryptocurrency, there is a point of failure, which is the company itself. There is a point in which governments can impose too much regulations, too much restrictions. They can make the system eventually obsolete. With Bitcoin, this is not the case. So for me, that's why I really believe that Bitcoin is perhaps the most important technology when it comes to advancing freedom and markets.
Strongly agree with both of your remarks there. So Bitcoin is 16 years old now, and over those 16 years, it has only grown in its reach and influence and its valuation. You know, it is one of the most valuable assets in the world with a market cap well north of $2 trillion American dollars. And so, yet at the same time, governments around the world, especially dictatorships, are trying to both increase their oversight and regulations on Bitcoin, kind of trying to impose their ideals on this, free market emergence of money, which is effectively what Bitcoin is. And so I wonder how you guys think about what the right balance is there between regulations and oversight and, Bitcoin as a tool for financial freedom. What is the correct balance?
So this is a very interesting question because So in one hand, if you implement the regulations, you automatically endorse that this is a currency, right? So you recognize this is a currency that you can use daily basis, which is a very important thing. Not just for us that we understand the tool, but like for people around the globe say, can I use this? It's not a scam, right? So it's an important thing. But in another hand, if your regulation hits to a specificity around like your choice to be private, to show whatever you want to show, to declare whatever you want to declare, then in this case, you remove the most important element of Bitcoin, which is decentralization. So if you pick Bitcoin and put it in a format of a bank, or a centralized institution, what happens is you take the property of this immediately, right? So, what I'm seeing right now is the desire to exactly frame the currency into that, into what we know, right? Like, because Bitcoin is so innovative that you don't know how you frame that. Like, what is the gray areas? What is the... So basically, what can be dangerous and in terms of the balance is like how you, by trying to help the regulation and protect people, you don't block them to be private, to choose the way that they can use that Bitcoin, and remove the property of Bitcoin to be decentralized and secure in the same time.
Yes, from my perspective, the biggest threat, in a way, to Bitcoin and to financial freedom is that the same problems that right now affect the regulated banking industry then becomes problem of this new technology. Why we have all these problems with the banking system is because the way it's regulated doesn't work. Internationally, there is a series of laws called anti-money laundering regulations, which are financial compliance rules, which makes transactions extremely expensive, which makes transactions extremely easy to be frozen, be paralyzed, which is allowing or is enabling that many people are losing their bank accounts. These regulations, there is an attempt to bring them to, for example, Bitcoin. There is an attempt that this regulation classify, for example, self-hosted wallets as high-risk instruments. If this happens from a regulatory perspective, if Bitcoin is classified as a high-risk technology, it means that many foundations will not be able to accept it. It means that many businesses will not want to accept it. So there is a fight that we have to do from the policy perspective to maintain this technology free from bad regulation, free from regulations that can be weaponized, free from regulations that can make the technology extremely rigid. And that, to me, is the biggest threat. There is, of course, the individual threats in authoritarian countries, in more repressive contexts, but internationally, what we need to fight against is this idea that we need to regulate Bitcoin the same way the traditional banking sector is regulated, because that's precisely why banking is failing so many people.
And just like to add to that is like the risk also for you to regulate self-custody as well. It's then you open a precedent that you can even regulate self-custody in cash, right? And we can get to the extreme point that you cannot even have, your kids cannot have their, the piggy banks anymore because you need to declare the piggy bank of your kid there, So of course I'm streaming this, but like it's a precedent that you can open up for that.
I mean, just to follow up on this, when you read the communique or the new regulations that international financial regulatory bodies issue, there is some people who want to regulate cash. They want to put know your customer on ATMs. They want to classify self-hosted wallets as a high-risk technology. There is an attempt to totally regulate the financial system. As you know, there is an attempt to create central bank digital currencies. an attempt to truly create financial control. And that is extremely problematic for the development of a free society that functions and that has power distributed among many members of society.
Very well said, Jorge. And you perfectly segued into my next question when you mentioned central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, for anyone that may have heard the acronym, but not the full name. So to your point, in 2009, Bitcoin was invented, and following its invention as the first form of digital money was an explosion of other digital assets and digital currencies. Some that are speculative, like meme coins, other cryptocurrencies claiming to do different things, different ways, governments introducing central bank digital currencies, private companies introducing stable coins. And so bringing it back to the freedom to transact, my question is, in light of all of these different digital assets and digital currencies, is Bitcoin still the best option for the freedom to transact? And how does the freedom to transact compare to something like a central bank digital currency or a stable coin? Can you achieve transactional freedom on a CBDC or stable coin, or is it just Bitcoin that is able to provide that freedom?
So basically, if you have someone that gonna open up their phones, their computers, and gonna say, what you were doing on McDonald's? What you was doing with your kid in the hotel X, right? Would you feel free, right? Like you're pretty much observed. And that's pretty much what it's PIX in Brazil right now, right? PIX is the central bank digital system. It's not a digital currency. But that's what exactly they are doing with the community. Of course, like, it makes the system very fast. It makes it very convenient. Now you see people on the beaches charging, even like homeless, getting, donations from PIX. But the problem of this is also, they are knowing everything you are doing. They are tracing everything. And the CBDCs are pretty much the same, right? It exists like some conversations around like, oh, we can make them more private in some extent. But in the end of the day, it's control, right? So I try not to be like super radical, like against everything. And that's why I'm saying like is the choice, is the freedom choice, right? If you are in Brazil and you need to pay people and you have access to PIX, is your choice to use that or cash, or you can start to use Bitcoin, right? So the problem of this is like, it's just like if I use my wallet, nobody's gonna know that I paid for what I paid, and in the amount I paid, if I do this in the decentralized way. But if I do this in a more centralized system, of course you're gonna do it. Stable coins, they're like another type of situation, right? Because they are filling a gap that Bitcoin couldn't fill until recently, which is give an alternative to the flexibility of the currency, right? So, of course, it's much easier to compare your local currency with the USD equivalent currency, right? The issue around this is still a centralized system, right? So if at some point the people that controls this currency get in trouble, it's like a big effect to everyone. And in the case of Bitcoin, it's a very, very impossible to happen unless you are in the centralized system inside of the Bitcoin ecosystem, right? So it's just like a fun fact, like how huge it's being like a stable coin in our region. I remember around like 2020, I was working in a peer-to-peer exchange. And Bitcoin, and I was seeing the numbers for Argentina, Venezuela, and Colombia. And suddenly, in Argentina, we start to seeing like a Bitcoin that was like reigning the country. You're seeing stable coins spiking, crossing the element. And then I start to asking myself, like, what's going on here, right? And I'm very lucky because one part of my work is go to on the ground and talk with people, right? And what they said, it was like, I love this idea that I can buy digital dollar. So again, the convenience was winning here instead of like doing something that can protect yourself, right? And right now, the stablecoin are huge in our region, especially for exchanging, like, paying broader, paying people broadly. And the interesting thing that probably a big chunk of people here doesn't know is there is right now tools in Bitcoin that allow you to freeze your Bitcoin as well. That you never touch another currency, but it's Bitcoin itself. So in Fedi we do that. There is another company called Blink that do that as well, that does that too. So you don't need anymore to get into other places and put yourself on risk in this centralized scheme as well.
Yes, for example, in Europe, where I spent a lot of the time in the year, they have this idea of CBDC, and it's very well developed. They are at the latest stages, but there is no use case for that. There is really no use case. They say that it's because of financial inclusion, financial stability from the central bank perspective. It's not true. It's political control, and it's less privacy for us. The problem with CBDC or with every financial instrument that is heavily regulated is the lack of financial privacy as well. Most people don't know, but your entire bank statement, your entire private information can be shared to law enforcement, to other banks, to other governments, without you even knowing that this happened. This is particularly problematic for people that are working in sensitive areas. And I'm not only talking about activists, I'm talking also about journalists, policymakers, and business people. Business people who are dealing in competition with geopolitical adversaries, they need to have their privacy in way more developed way than what they have right now. Because if somebody has access to your financial data, they have access to your entire life and your business capacity. When it comes to stablecoins, I feel that stablecoins are complementary technology to Bitcoin, and is something that, again, provides a lot of financial inclusion, a lot of opportunities. I like stablecoins, but at the same time, they don't have the characteristics that make Bitcoin, I believe, the bank of last resort. The truly independent, autonomous, protected technology when everything else fails, when you cannot open a bank account for political reasons, when you cannot have a stable coin because you don't meet the know your customer requirements, when everything else fails and you need to send money to your family member in a country like Venezuela, or where you need to send money to a nonprofit doing great work in the Middle East, when everything else fails, we need to have Bitcoin. And that's why I'm here, and that's why I flew from Europe to be with you today, because I really believe that we need to work on this, because it's the last resort that we have.
I feel like that might deserve a round of applause. All right, so we're going to move on to the more interactive portion, which is the question period of this panel. So if you have a question for any of these wonderful panelists here, feel free to raise your hand. And I think we have some mics going around that we can share with you.
Hello. I want to talk about the downsides of Bitcoin, which are the slowness, and eventually there's going to need to be some kind of second layer solution. What I understand is that Fedi represents that second layer on Bitcoin. Is that right?
So yeah, so in this case, we don't like that much like layers labeling, but like what we do basically, we have you have like a Bitcoin, then you have another layer of Bitcoin which is called Lightning Network, and Lightning Network, it's basically a solution to make a transaction super fast, But then you have an issue on that that is related to privacy and limitation on the amount of transactions that you could use in this channel. So what Ferry brought as a solution is not a super new solution, which is very known. It's eCash. eCash is a blind signature based, created like for Shaman. I think it's like in the 90s, something like this. And he was proposing to the bank system on that time to create like a blind signature that you don't need to know who is sending what to who. It's like a carbon paper that you sign. Okay, I bought your envelope, I'm gonna sign here, and I'm gonna give it to you. So I'm gonna validate this, right? So what eCash can inside of the system can do, it's basically you deposit in your community bank, in your community wallet, an amount in Bitcoin, and the eCash this is converted into eCash. So basically, this allows that our transactions inside become blinded, private, and at the same time, transactions that the system just see as a balance between us. So you don't need like other people go there, approve, and go to everywhere. So this optimizes a lot the activity of the Bitcoin. And then when we want to leave that federation, that bank, and send to another bank, you use the Lightning network or you use the Bitcoin. So what you get with that is the Vegas system that I say, because everything inside of the federation, nobody knows. Even the people that are in charge of the keys of the federation knows who is inside, what they are transacting, how much they have, because of the eCash system. And then when you send money out of this, you are sending money out of the wallet of the community. So it's basically like Vegas. What stays in the federation, what happens in the federation stays in the federation. What leaves the federation is just the wallet of the federation. So you don't know that Renata sent a fund to you. It's the wallet of the federation that is sent out. So this kind of our solution for privacy, but also to speed and to cut a lot the cost of these transactions as well.
I think that you also have
Hola, hola.
All right. So I do have a question from the perspective of the regulator, because every time, I'm far from being an expert. I'm very ignorant with Bitcoin. But every time that I meet with a regulator, with a policymaker in the European Parliament, even though they come from the center, very liberal people, very freedom thinkers, but then their argument is we need to regulate this not because of market unity, not because of consumer protection, but because Bitcoin would enable people avoid sanctions from Russia, and Hamas is using Bitcoin. That is the main argument. And I really don't know what is the counter argument. I'm pretty sure that there is a counter argument, but then I will really appreciate if you could help me to actually then come back to this question.
I mean, when it comes to sanctions evasion, for example, and when it comes to money laundering, financial authorities, they have all the tools to actually assess where this is taking place. Where is the sanctions evasion? Where is the money laundering? All the tools are available. Sanctions are being circumvented by traditional banking institutions. They are not being circumvented by new technology. They are circumvented at their own eyesight. The same is with money laundering. You know that only 1% of the money laundering globally is ever caught by all these anti-money laundering rules. This narrative that Bitcoin is used for these purposes is a narrative that I have seen, as you mentioned, in all banking regulators, in the European Parliament, in the European Central Bank. I met with them 3 times, in which it's very funny, because in articles they make these kind of statements, and then when I met with them, they tell me that anti-money laundering is not part of their mandate. It is, again, it is extremely problematic. What is the solution to all this? As everything, with transparency. We need to have reports We need to have cost-benefit analysis. We need to have more detailed diagnostics of how a financial crime is actually taking place, but not with narratives, but with real data. But that's precisely the main argument that we have against, but it's totally false argument. And the first thing you need to tell them when they tell you this is why, after, for example, in Europe, spending every year $100 billion on anti-money laundering compliance rules, why only 1% of money laundering is ever caught? Why, after we took away all financial privacy of people, we are still having all these problems? Are we going to double down with a system that failed, or are we going to implement something new? Because if they want to double down with the same regulation that have been failing, they will make our economies extremely unproductive. Because then every bank or every new technology that wants to provide financial inclusion to people, every time they want to do that, they will put all this regulation so that people cannot have access to financial instruments. What is the result? Immigrants don't have bank accounts. Poor people cannot have bank accounts. Non-profits are losing their bank accounts. And if we don't provide these people financial services, that's when these people are going to be in actually the risk of criminal activities. Because if you don't have financial instruments, then how can you rent an apartment? How can you have a job? How can you be productive? So it's really, we need to really fight against that narrative.
Gracias. Mi pregunta es más para Jorge. Qué gusto que estén acá y tremenda participación. De verdad, muchísimas gracias. Thank you so much for all the information that you have told us. Mi comentario es un poco más, yo le mando dinero a mi papá, coincido con todo lo que compartes, lo que mencionas, y más de Venezuela. Yo le mando justo dinero a él, se convierte a USDC y luego lo recibe por medio de Binance. Esa es la wallet que él utiliza, y así es por medio de Bitcoin es que logro mandarle el dinero que tanto para él es valioso, ¿no? Y para mí es un gusto mandar, ¿no? Mi comentario va un poco más de ¿qué wallet recomendarías además de Binance? Porque no todas funcionan bien en Venezuela, y me refiero más por un tema político. Había otra aplicación, o digamos wallet, que era Uphold, que entiendo es americana y ya no funciona, o por medio de la geolocalización verifican que él está en Venezuela y no funciona la aplicación. Ya eso es por un tema político en Venezuela. Si la wallet Binance has a problem tomorrow, what can you recommend to me? Another wallet, another form to send money to them, to my family?
I mean, we can talk about this later, but there is plenty of options. There is many options. We have, for example, here Fedi, which is, we have here Renata, in case you have more technical questions about that. There is many options, honestly. Self-hosted wallet is usually the best. And after my talk, I can give you like more specifics on that.
I just want to comment something that seeing like Venezuelans and talking about our region, right? So there is this study that they could prove that Venezuelans brought Bitcoin to the Latin America, basically. So the idea, if you guys check, like there is an old site called like Useful Tulips. So what they did, they compare the peer-to-peer exchange market with the blackouts in Venezuela on the beginning of the Bitcoin coming to the country, to the region. And every time you would have had a blackout in Venezuela, you would see the peer-to-peer market going down. So, and why is that? So the story of this is, it was basically the Venezuelan would have moved to another country in Latin America, and then they wouldn't have documents, they wouldn't have, they're still establishing in the country, right? So, but they would have some work there, and they wouldn't need to send funds back home. So they would say, who has Bitcoin around that I can exchange my Brazilian reals or my Colombian pesos into Bitcoin? And then with this Bitcoin, I can send back home, and back home they can exchange locally, right? And it was funny because during all this time, like 2018 until, I don't know, 2021, I could see the spikes of the migration of Venezuelans through the place that I used to work for the peer-to-peer market. So you'd say, oh, now is Argentina, now is Chile, by just seeing this flow. It's amazing how smart was, I mean, again, comes from the necessity, but how amazing is to see how this tool could help so many people around the region. Hello.
Mic check. And thank you for these incredible questions. I have a question for each one of you, and Zach as well. We've talked about the blockchain trilemma, and that is a very important topic: security, decentralization, and scalability. Can you please comment on Bitcoin, stablecoins, and other cryptocurrencies in terms of absolute scarcity? Why is that important?
This is for you, you know?
I thought it was all for all three of us, but
Yes, me too. Okay.
yeah.
So, Renata.
Well, he did address you first. So what Tristan is referring to here is the idea that when you have a digital asset or a blockchain, you have to make trade-offs in terms of it was scalability, scarcity, and sorry, what was the last one? Decentralization. And so typically you can have two of those, and you have to sacrifice the third. When you put Bitcoin into this framework, typically you're looking at something that has decentralization and absolute scarcity. And it is achieving those things by, I would say, sacrificing the scalability aspect of it. But I wouldn't say that that means that Bitcoin is not scalable. I would say that Bitcoin has a different way to scale, which was mentioned earlier, which is through layers. And so there are a myriad of different protocols emerging and applications emerging on top of Bitcoin, like what Fedi uses, which is eCash, but also the Lightning Network and Arc, and a new one launched this year, which was Spark. And they're all kind of different application layers for Bitcoin that improve its scalability. So I mean, I would argue that Bitcoin is actually hitting all three of the blockchain trilemma, as it's called, which is quite rare. And then you look at something like a central bank digital currency or a stable coin, and these things have really high scalability because they're centralized. They have a really high transaction throughput because it's effectively just a centralized ledger that you just can easily have a central authority deduct balances from and credit balances in other areas. But where these fall short mainly is in scarcity, right? In many ways, both central bank digital currencies and stable coins replicate many of the failures of fiat money into the digital world. And the main one I'm mentioning here is the idea that they can still be printed, albeit digitally, ad infinitum, right? They don't have a 21 million supply limit like Bitcoin does. So they might not be able to serve as a hedge against inflation, or just as a savings account in a place like Venezuela where inflation is running at 229%. Yeah, do you guys have anything to add there?
No, I think it's and I know our time is almost over, everyone is hungry, but I think the scarcity element on this is, for me, it's a very important element, because Bitcoin is a deflationary currency, right? So the fact that you cannot print more Bitcoin makes the fact that we all know as less you have, as more you want. So there is like this analysis that says over time, all the currencies, they're gonna devaluate because they're gonna print. You're gonna have Bitcoin getting lesser and lesser available. So more and more people want to get this currency. And what's gonna happen is like, suddenly the demand and the offer they're gonna like switch, right? And the price of this is gonna go up and up, which is a big contrast with the regular system that we currently know, right?
Yes, if I very quickly, if I had to highlight something, I would say is the decentralization aspect, because what I have seen is that financial regulation is really choking a lot of financial institutions and is really making very difficult for many people to have bank accounts. So if you have a decentralized system, it means you have a resilient system. It means you have a system that is highly democratic in a way. So that for me is the primary value of Bitcoin as a technology for financial freedom.
All right, well, thank you all for joining us for this
Thank
panel.
you.
Let's give a big round of applause to Jorge and Renata.
Thank you so much to all our panelists. We have lunch now at the cafeteria, and we'll resume back here sharply at 3:30 for David's Cornerstone talk and the panel that follows before we do our closing session of the Radical Innovation Summit. Thank you again, all three. Thank you.